Hi everybody, welcome to Safe Diving. So in today's video you guys want me to talk about dry suits, and recently it was actually the hottest day of the year so far where I live. So yeah, talking about dry suits is already making me feel kind of hot, but actually is fine. I love dry suits and they have just a ton of different features all over them for me to cover. And they are quite an investment, so it is best that you actually have as much information as possible when you're investing in one. So, if you're just starting out and you have no clue what a dry suit is in particular, a dry suit is an airtight suit that traps an insulating layer of air all over your body except for your head and your hands. And that insulating layer of air actually keeps you nice and warm. A wetsuit, in contrast, lets a thin layer of water inside of the suit and it traps that water underneath the wetsuit against your skin, and that layer of water then acts a bit like a really thin hot water bottle warmed up by your skin. That combined with the teeny tiny little bubbles inside neoprene, which acts a bit like double glazing, that all sort of works together to keep your body heat in. Air, however, is a much better insulator than water. It's one reason why your double glazing isn't full of water right now. It's full of air, or at least some kind of gas. So if you're diving somewhere cold or you're planning particularly longer extended dives, then a dry suit is recommended. There are some caveats to dry suits though. They're not as easy to dive as a wetsuit and they do require some training before you just go and jump in the water whilst wearing one. Because they use a layer of gas to insulate you, you're adding an extra airspace to you, which will change volume and buoyancy as your depth changes. And this bubble of air is free to move around your entire body, so too much buoyancy inside can actually lead to some radical changes in either your buoyancy or your body position. If you just put on an airtight suit and just started swimming downwards, the increase in water pressure would just vacuum pack you into the suit, and at the beginning of a dive you can actually really feel this effect. The entire suit just kind of squeezes into you, so we use an inflator valve a lot like your BCD. You see, when you dive a dry suit, you need a second inflator hose on your regulator so that you can add some gas to your dry suit to relieve that squeeze. It also adds some insulation as well as allowing you to control your buoyancy. You can now use your dry suit to control your buoyancy instead or in combination with your BCD, which is an added benefit. Only don't do it too much or you just end up looking like the Michelin Man. If you're adding gas, then you need to be able to dump that gas as you ascend too. So dry suits need a dump valve to get rid of any expanding gases. So there is just a whole ton of different bits to dry suits, as I said earlier. So get yourself comfortable, make yourself a cup of tea or coffee. The sections are actually going to be broken down in the timeline below, so you should be able to jump backwards and forwards quite easily. And actually I will be talking about bodily functions at one point, so do be warned. There will be a warning beforehand, but yeah, just keep your eyes out for it. But yeah, let's take a closer look at dry suits. Okay, so the way that you buy a dry suit depends on your requirements. Off the shelf is the quickest way to get into a dry suit, but you may need to make some compromises. Off the shelf dry suits will come in generic stock sizes with the most popular features, so they're a good guess, but they may not be exactly what you want to the letter. You see, how they make dry suits is they'll make a blank suit in standard small, medium and large kind of sizes, but they'll leave the seals and the boots and sort of any extra kind of exciting bits out until someone actually orders a suit. But fitting boots and seals can actually take days, so to avoid waiting times, the manufacturers will actually make up a few popular choices that have pretty high chances of fitting most people of that size. So a small suit will often have much smaller boots fitted than a large, obviously. They'll be fitted with latex seals, which I'll talk about later. But off the shelf or off the rack, whatever you want to call it, there'll be very generic suits, which if that's what fits you and it has everything that you want, perfect, go for it. If you have particularly large feet for your height or a latex allergy, for example, then you can order a fresh suit. Go to your dive center and they'll take all of your measurements and sort of any changes that you might want and say, oh no, I want sort of this, that and the other. They then send that information to the manufacturer and then the manufacturer makes your suit up. They take one of those blank suits and they fit the boots, they fit the valves, they fit the seals that you have asked for, but do be prepared to wait a little while. It's not unusual to wait 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes you can get it faster if they have something that should fit you sort of made up, but don't kick and scream if your suit won't be ready for this weekend. It takes time to fit everything and then for the glue to set properly and then actually leak test your suit and then if they need to repair anything. So yeah, don't make any plans until your suit actually arrives. If you unfortunately don't fit into a generic small, medium or large, then your best option is made to measure, I'm afraid. You can find a suit that kind of fits, but it's kind of tight across the chest or it's kind of baggy around the crotch, but it's not a great idea. Too baggy and you'll just get trapped gas in certain areas, which is dangerous for your buoyancy, and too tight just won't be comfortable and you'll just get a cold spot in that area. So it's really best to get a suit that fits you properly. Same procedure, go to your dive center and they'll measure you up. If the manufacturer thinks that you'll fit into a stock size, then great, it kind of puts you back to the previous step, which is a lot cheaper. But if not, they'll make one up for you based on your measurements. So spend some time with your dive center and sort of measure everything 3 times at least, because every single brand measures things ever so slightly differently. One can measure your arm length from your wrist up to where your shoulder kind of starts, other it's to where it sort of starts to become your neck, so that's a good few inches and you can get a really oddly shaped suit if you're not paying attention where you're supposed to be measuring. And yeah, this can all be very time consuming. If you can, your best option is to ask the manufacturer well beforehand what their measuring guidelines are first. They usually have a downloadable like PDF with a little diagram of sort of how to measure yourself. Then measure yourself at home before you even go to your dive center. Try and get a friend to do this because they'll be a bit more objective and they can physically see where those kind of lines are supposed to be. And then after you've kind of got all of your measurements, then go get measured up by the dive center. Hopefully your measurements are going to match up, which is perfect. If they don't, then spend a bit more time just going, oh no, it actually should have been such and such. Now, it's different for each manufacturer, but measurements are usually taken over a regular t-shirt, and then the manufacturer will just allow for a standard undersuit. You don't have to measure yourself in the undersuit. I don't know of any manufacturer that does require that, but just make sure you read all of their recommendations before you do your measuring. If you're planning to wear a particularly bulky suit, then tell them first and they'll add a little extra room for you. Fourth Element are offering a very clever way to measure yourself up at key dive centers where you kind of stand on a template and sort of get a photo of yourself against a certain type of background. Or even better, you can actually stand on a special turntable and basically an Xbox Connect kind of scans all of your measurements as you turn around. Now I've tried it out once and it's pretty spot on with your measurements, but only select places are doing it. But made-to-measure suits are more expensive because they've got more work going into it, obviously, and they do take much longer to make, so again, be very patient and make sure that you get all of your measurements exactly right. And whilst it's being made, don't pork out on any cakes and pies, because if the suit doesn't fit you, then unfortunately it's your problem. It's a custom-made item, so it's non-returnable and it kind of sits on the outside of whatever the return policies are. So measure twice, read through your order form very, very thoroughly and make sure that everything is exactly correct, because whatever you put on that order form is what you will receive. You'll typically find 3 airtight seals on a dry suit, one around the neck and one around each of your arms for your hands. So there are 3 different types of seals right now that I know of, or at least the 3 most common are latex, neoprene and silicone. Latex seals are the golden standard. Latex is a thin seal and does provide a very good seal, and they're pretty easy to get on and off. The first thing with latex seals is that when they're brand new, they need to be stretched. Brand new latex seals will be tight to the point of cutting off blood flow. So if they choke you out when you very first try on your suit, don't worry too much. Obviously have a friend around so you don't pass out, but yeah, don't worry if your cuff seal feels really tight and it's almost cutting off blood circulation when you very first put it on. That isn't unusual. Most divers stretch their neck seal over a 12-litre tank overnight before they actually go to use it, but be very careful because stretching too much can obviously damage the seal. It's that tricky kind of fine line. The best method that I've seen is if you can get your hands on a traffic cone legally, measure your neck and stretch the seal for 12 hours around that portion of the cone that's the same size as your neck. Before you do that though, look around the edges for any kind of nicks or anything sharpish on the cone, because latex can rip and tear really easily with a teeny tiny imperfection. If it's still too tight, then and only after you've stretched it, then you can actually cut your seals. Around your neck and cuff seals, you'll find sort of parallel bands. These are templates for cutting your seals so they get a little bit bigger, but only cut 1 ring off at a time. Don't jump 2 or 3 because eventually you just try it on and it will just leak and you just need a brand new one. When you're cutting them, try and cut them around something round and solid, like a wooden cone or your legally acquired traffic cone, or just a decent sized drinks bottle. And clean up any kind of nicks around the edge so the edge is perfectly smooth. Scissors are quite dangerous, and nicks and that edge often lead to tearing and of course needing a brand new seal. It just gets expensive. Neoprene seals were your only other choice up until a few years back, and they tend to be a tougher alternative. Neoprene seals will have a smooth inner lining that seals against your skin, but it's pretty fragile on the inside, so be careful not to tug too much on them in one particular place because it's really easy to tear them and you will get a very obvious crescent shaped sort of cut, and the dive centre knows that you did it. It is pretty easy to fix them though, which is quite nice. All you just need is a tiny amount of glue and that usually sort of seals it and you're good to go diving again. Neoprene seals don't suit every diver though. Whilst they're typically less tight than latex, if you have skinny wrists, you can often find a little channel between your tendons kind of here where it can basically let the water in because the neoprene isn't quite as supple as the latex. The newest alternative is actually my personal favourite, and that's silicone. Silicone is thin and flexible like latex, but stronger and much faster to change. You see, latex and neoprene seals need to be glued into your suit. So if you need to replace a seal, it can take days or even weeks to loosen the old glue, clean up the suit, glue the new seal in place and then tape it over before waiting for all of that glue to set properly, and then you can leak test it. Because glue doesn't stick to silicone, you can't glue them into your suit, which is actually a blessing in disguise. You see, you need rings glued to your suit that silicone seals then get fixed to. This means that the rings don't need to be changed, just the seal if it's broken, so that way you can swap a broken seal in just minutes, not days. The downside to this is that you have to have these kind of rings around your neck and your cuffs, which, to be brutally honest, you don't really notice when you're in the water. So they're not the end of the world, and they actually act as a really great mounting point for one of my upcoming points, dry gloves. Dry suits can be split into two separate basic categories: membrane or neoprene. Membrane suits just use a thin layer of material to keep you dry underwater. They'll often be called something like trilaminate or bilaminate. I've even seen quadlaminate, I think, before, but that basically describes how many layers the suit is actually made from. But they're all made of a thin layered material that keeps you dry. The benefits of membrane dry suits is that they're very light compared to their neoprene alternatives. They have very little effect on your buoyancy because it's just a very thin membrane. There's no real sort of buoyance sort of characteristics of the suit in itself, and they let you sort of control just how warm you are based on what you're wearing underneath them. The downsides are that the thin material has no warmth to it alone, so without something underneath you can get really cold really fast. There's no sort of thermal performance of a very thin membrane. And the material, if it doesn't fit you quite perfectly and you're not wearing a really thick sort of undersuit, as you go down, as it kind of scrunches down, it can actually pinch sort of certain areas where the material folds over, but only if you're not wearing an undersuit. Neoprene dry suits are made from crushed neoprene, so they're often something like 8mm thick neoprene that's been squished down to 4mm or something along those lines, and they're typically more form-fitting and kind of forgiving to pinching, and they themselves have their own insulation, so you don't need as much of an undersuit underneath to keep warm. The downside though is that they're heavier to carry around, they're much more buoyant, so you need to carry a bit more lead, and they can feel quite bulky in the water. The trade-off is that they're a lot tougher. They can take a lot more abuse without leaking compared to a membrane. Membranes are pretty easy to repair though. If it's just a pinprick, a bicycle repair kit will go a long way. It's horses for courses. It's kind of down to personal preference. When I used to teach in a neoprene dry suit. It was tough as nails, and touch wood, it never went wrong for me. But now, more in my kind of recreational side of things, I tend to spend more time in my membrane dry suit. I just find it's a bit easier to get in and out of. It's not quite as big and clunky, and yeah, it's a bit easier to kind of move around in. There are two standard entries and a few more exotic sort of entry types. The two standard are front and back entry dry suits. Back in the days, you'd actually have two tenders literally stand either side of your suit, both of them holding your neck seal open as wide as they could, so that the diver could literally climb into the suit through the neck seal. Luckily, times have changed and waterproof zips have been invented. Back entry dry suits will have a zipper across the back of your shoulders. You climb in through that, pop your arms down the sleeves and head through the neck seal, and your buddy zips you up. These are just fine, but you do of course need a second person. You do need your buddy to help you get in and out of the suit. Not too much of an inconvenience unless you are desperate for a pee and your buddy is taking their sweet time. Also, when you're a guy going for a pee, your neck seal is actually in the firing line, if you catch my drift. Front entry suits will have a zipper from one shoulder down to the opposite hip. This means that you can get in and out of the suit all by yourself, but it can be a little bit of a contortion act at times to get in and out from. Because of this, front entry suits are often telescopic, so your suit is going to be particularly long, especially in the torso. They basically overlap the material at the waist, and they use a crotch strap to stop that from sort of undoing. It makes it a lot easier to get in and out from it, but hanging up your suit, it can easily become like 7 foot tall. Those are your two most standard sort of styles, back entry and front entry, but you can find some different kind of zipper styles. The other most common one is a U-zip from one shoulder under your neck and then back up to the other shoulder. These are technically a front entry, but donning and doffing sort of all by yourself, it can be done. It's not the easiest. I have done it myself, but because it's a like constant curve, it's not always the easiest to get a good run. Then you'll find a vintage crotch zip. Not to be confused with the convenient zip that I'm going to be talking about later, but crotch zips are as if you sat on a chainsaw and the zipper basically runs from your backside between your legs and then up to your chest. So you climb into the suit through the crotch. I've honestly never seen one of these actually in the wild, and I don't think anybody makes a current suit today with one, but they definitely existed, and you can see some for sale on sort of second-hand sites. The zipper itself, you actually get a choice on. So the classic zipper we actually stole from NASA spacesuits, and if it works for astronauts, then it should work for us divers. These are brass zips or metal zips, whatever you want to call them, and they're pretty tough. Literally, they're actually pretty tough to do up and undo, so you will need to wax them or at least grease them in some way so that the zipper actually moves smoothly. Brass zippers are good, but they work best in straight lines. They don't like to bend very much, and if you're not careful, you can actually break them if you bend it too much when you're packing it away, which can be a very expensive mistake. So try to keep them as flat as possible when you're storing them and moving them around. The newer alternative is a plastic zipper. It's often called a T-zip, but this is a brand name. You don't honestly see too many actual T-zips anymore. They did the job, but they weren't great, but there've been a few more sort of improvements now. I think a lot of them are just YKKs. Plastic zippers are much lighter and more flexible than brass zips, and they're much easier to do up and undo all by yourself. You still need to clean them obviously and sort of wax them so that they run nice and smoothly, but we're seeing a lot more plastic zippers on dry suits now because they're a lot more forgiving. Drysuit zippers will often have a more conventional zipper over the top of them. These, however, are not watertight in any way. They are just solely there to protect the main zipper from damage. The main thing to remember with zippers is to be gentle with them, keep them as flat as possible, and make sure that they're done up all the way. If you leave a little bit of gap, no, it's very easy to leave that teeny tiny little gap, especially if you're doing up someone else's dry suit and they don't check it. It's very easy just to leave a millimeter's gap, and then you jump in the water and you think that you've got a leaking cuff seal. It's not, it's just that you need to pull it closed properly. Your suit is completely sealed down to your feet, and you have a couple of choices down there too. You can have proper boots fitted, which are kind of like Wellington boots basically. They're very tough and they're pretty basic, and you do have lots of room inside for your feet, so they are pretty comfortable, but if they're too big, too much air can actually get trapped inside of them, which just causes havoc with your buoyancy. And if the legs on your dry suit are just a little bit too long, then your boots can actually slip off, which just really ruins your dive, and you'll always be known as that guy. So more fitted boots are actually a better alternative. You'll often have a sort of neoprene section around the ankle, and then like a Velcro strip to actually keep your boots in place. The alternative to either of those is neoprene socks. The downside to these is that you'll need to invest in a pair of rock boots, which is an added expense, but the benefit is that if you wear through your rock boots, it's not the end of the world, you're still dry. All you have to do is just throw those away and buy another pair of boots. If you wear through your fitted boots on your dry suit, it's very expensive. Replacing old dry suit boots with new ones doesn't come cheap, and if you want to do it yourself, is a real pain in the neck because everything's done from the inside and the outside of the dry suit, so you have to turn your entire suit inside out, do something, turn it inside out again, do something, and it is just a lot of work, which is why it's pretty expensive. Dry suits will often have thigh pockets fitted to them, which is honestly one of the best things about them. Given the choice, always choose the dry suit with the best storage options. Not all pockets are made the same though, and this is where divers can get really nerdy, at least I can, because you can get just a basic rubbish pocket, which is just a pouch just glued onto your leg, and then you can get a proper thigh pouch. Thigh pouches will either have a zippered closure along the top or a Velcro flap. Zippers are a pain in the water and they don't secure themselves after you let go of them. A Velcro flap is an easy way to open it one-handed, and even with clunky gloves you can still do it, and then as soon as you let go they tend to close themselves, so the contents of your pocket doesn't just empty itself. Flaps also allow for an extra little section of storage for small bits. Depending on the pocket manufacturer, they might see this as an opportunity and give you some kind of quick access little pocket. Inside the pocket is a bit more interesting. Just a basic pouch, just an open hole with nothing inside of it isn't that great. A good thigh pocket will actually have anchor points like D-rings and bungee loops to actually clip things off onto. Without these, your stuff is just free to fall out as you kind of rummage around inside that pocket, and you're just going to lose stuff. Good pockets will also have sectioned off areas so that you can kind of organize your gear a little bit better inside. That way you know where stuff is likely to be when you're rummaging around and you don't have to look down to try and find it. There was a fashion of gusseted pockets a little while ago where you would have one kind of thin, sleek pocket on one side and then one big pocket on the other side. You could use a zipper to keep one pocket tidy and close to your leg, and then kind of unzip it if you ever needed that sort of extra storage. But most divers just tend to leave both pockets large. I used to have a dry suit like that, and I don't think I ever did up those zippers because why would you? Most pockets are just on the side of your legs. It's a pretty convenient place, but Hollis actually tried out pockets on the front of your legs for side mount divers so they didn't get in the way. Now these are pretty niche pockets on the front of your legs. I can't think of too many reasons not to have them on the front of your legs though, so don't know, just kind of be aware that they exist. As I said earlier, you need a way to get gas into your dry suit and out of your dry suit. The inflation valve is typically on your chest, kind of here. They normally have a push button, just like your BCD. Push the button, gas rushes in, job done. There are some variants with kind of hinged buttons, but that's not usually that complicated. It's normally some kind of pushy button, but yeah, usually it's just some kind of button. The inflator usually swivels around so you can actually route your hose in from wherever you like, under either arm or over a shoulder, wherever you want, but some are a bit more limiting where you only get a few degrees of adjustment. If you're diving in much colder waters and you're planning on using a heated undersuit, then you'll want a special inflator with a power cable running through it. Heated undersuits, of course, they're on the inside of your dry suit, but they typically have an external battery because it's a lot safer, but to actually get the power, the electricity inside of your dry suit, you can't just tuck the cable down through your neck seal, so you actually have to use a specialized inflator, which of course minimizes the risk of any leaks to your dry suit. Dump valves are typically on your left shoulder or on the cuff, but some divers have one a little bit lower down on their leg, or actually they just sort of keep it on the elbow. Just like your BCD, which has a bunch of dump valves all over it, you always want to be able to dump any expanding gas as you ascend. Shoulder dumps are the most popular and they're often described as auto dumps. The kind of domed or the top section will actually rotate, so if you screw it all the way in, it actually shuts the valve completely. This is quite nice after a dive because you can just inflate your dry suit and that just relieves all of the squeeze, and it's really nice just to get some fresh air in. The more you unscrew the valve though, the easier it will be for any gas around it to escape through that valve. So if you undo it all the way, as soon as any gas basically touches the valve, it's just going to go straight through it. So I normally have it done up a little bit, somewhere halfway. In an emergency, of course, you can bash the valve, and actually pushing on it will open the valve, allowing gas to escape. Auto dumps are great. I like them myself, and they're usually either Cytec or Apex. There is some performance changes between the two, but I'll kind of leave that choice up to you. For me, I've never had a problem with either. The only difference is one's a little bit more sort of proud, is a bit more pronounced, it sticks out a little bit more, but they both do the same job. One just does it a little bit faster. You can also find more basic one-way valves, which in my experience aren't always one-way. These are a lot smaller, they're a lot simpler, and obviously a lot cheaper. They're typically your cuff dumps, so they go right on the cuff of your dry suit. So in the water, you have to ask a question to sort of dump gas so that the air can get to the highest points, but on the surface, they can often leak. They actually need the water pressure outside them to keep the valve closed, so on the surface they get a bit confused and you can end up just with a wet sleeve. Some divers like their dump valve on their elbows, so it's a bit more of a conscious effort to actually ditch some gas. This seems to be more of a military thing though in my experience. I've seen a few military divers sort of specifically ask for this, and I have heard rumours, I don't think I've ever seen one, of dump valves actually fitted to a leg of a dry suit, so if you're inverted you can dump it. It's not particularly popular though. Personally, I like an auto shoulder dump. You get control over exactly how sensitive they are, and it's a really convenient place to be able to dump gas without changing your body position in the water. All you do is just kind of shrug a little bit, and that's usually enough just to dump some expanding gas. So that's your basic dry suit kind of sorted, that's the foundation set, but there are some extra upgrades and of course accessories that you can add on top. But first of all, it's very important to know what exactly should come with your dry suit, because you don't just get a suit. 99% of the time, because I can never promise it's 100% of the time, your dry suit will come with a hood. Now, it depends on the manufacturer, they don't always come with a hood, but in a lot of cases you do get a free hood, and it's quite nice, mainly when you're first starting out, because you kind of want a hood for the cold water, but when you're on your sort of 4th and 5th dry suit, then yeah, they end up sort of piling up. So this is actually a free hood. It will be sized appropriately to the dry suit, so don't ask for a refund or a different size once it's actually arrived, because the dive centre, they don't want to get, and then under no obligation to give you a refund because it's a free hood. If you want a particular sized hood, then mention it sort of when you're measuring up for your dry suit. Otherwise, it's just too much of a pain, and your dive centre will be the ones who actually have to pay for it to be swapped over, and of course they'll be less likely to do you a favour in the future. So try and mention it early. Don't sort of get this hood and go, oh, it's a medium, I don't really want a medium, I want a large. It's not really their problem. It's a free hood. It's a gift. Don't complain about it. New dry suits will come with a inflator hose, or at least they should do. I don't know of any dry suit that comes from new without a hose. Sometimes they might hide it, they'll put it in a pocket, or they'll sort of put it inside the suit itself, so it falls down into the leg. So do a good bit of rummaging before you shout at your dive centre, because it's probably in there somewhere. But it'll be like a 90cm long hose, and that's enough to reach sort of underneath your arm and around your body. So you don't need to buy a separate inflator hose. It should come with one, or at least you shouldn't have to sort of buy a new one unless you want one that's a particular colour or a particular length. But yeah, I've never come across a brand new dry suit that didn't come with a inflator hose. And dry suits will often come with a bag. Obviously they don't always come with a bag, but they usually come with some kind of duffel bag, or maybe sometimes they come with something that kind of doubles up as a changing mat, which is quite nice, so that you can sort of get changed on a really clean surface. Because yeah, if you think a small stone inside your shoe when you're going for a walk is annoying, a small stone inside your dry suit 30 meters down is really annoying. A lot of dry suits will have braces inside them. Some people call them suspenders, but that means different things in different countries. So yeah, braces, they keep them up. So if you've got sort of thigh pockets especially, you really do want a set of braces to sort of hold the waist up. Otherwise the weight of what's inside of your pockets can kind of drag them down, and your crotch just gets sort of lower and lower. But it's mainly useful out of the water between your dives so that they don't fall off and drag on the floor. But in the water, it kind of holds everything where you want it to be. Some dry suits will have a warm neck, which is just simply a section of neoprene around the neck seal. This, as the name suggests, adds a little bit of insulation around your neck, where you only usually have, if you've got latex or a sort of silicone neck seal, a really thin sort of section of protection there. And of course no undersuit, because your undersuit doesn't want to interfere with the neck seal, so they're usually quite short as well. So that sort of covers it up and acts as a little bit like a wetsuit. They also act to protect that sort of fragile seal underneath it from damage. So if you've got your BCD strap, it's going to sort of rub against the neoprene instead of your actual neck seal. And you can also tuck in your hood underneath the warm neck if you really want to get into it, and that slows water from creeping into your hood. Okay, so onto optional extras. You can find gaiters as something that you can buy and wear on top of your suit around your sort of lower leg. They're usually like elasticated, so they're made to actually keep air from traveling down from your suit down towards your feet, which is quite nice because it means you're not inverted, but it does have the opposite effect of trapping air that does manage to get down into your feet. So it's a catch-22. It's kind of a preventative. Touch wood, I've never had a problem like that with my dry suit, but yeah, if you do have the sort of larger boots, it might be nicer to have something that sort of keeps it a bit snugger. But yeah, do be aware that it will be harder for the gas to get back out again. Dry gloves I heavily recommend, especially if you have ring systems already fitted to your dry suit. Most ring systems are made by Cytec, the sort of the oval cuff ring, so you can very easily fit something like Waterproof Ultima or Fourth Element's Ellipse. COPPA is a great dry glove set with sort of metal rings, so they don't sort of get damaged with the cold, and they're a bit stronger. They're actually working with a lot of manufacturers, so you can actually have COPPA dry gloves fitted to your suit from scratch at the factory, which is quite nice. And of course you can retrofit them to sort of round latex cuff systems. Dry gloves basically leave your cuff seal in place, and then you have a watertight glove that covers your hands, and then you have just a really thin, like woolly glove or something underneath it, so your hands stay dry, which is much better than sort of wet neoprene gloves, so they stay much warmer. But again, it's a sealed airspace, so you do need to sort of break that cuff seal just a teensy little bit to allow some kind of air to flow through with, like, I use a small capillary tube, so that you can equalize that airspace. But with a really thin pair of gloves, just like washing up gloves, your hands, they stay really warm, and of course they're dry, so you have good dexterity. So unlike with a really thick pair of 7mm gloves, you don't trade dexterity for warmth. You only have like a 2mm thick glove and you're just as warm. The only downside is just you have to be really careful not to rip them, because if you do puncture that glove, then especially if you have broken that seal, you do sort of run the risk of water sort of getting into your suit. If you're having a suit made from scratch, then you can have a convenience zip fitted. You can also do it retroactively, but it's best to do it with a brand new suit. A convenience zip is basically a really short zipper just above your crotch. So basically, yeah, you don't have to climb out of your nice warm and dry suit if you need to go for a wee. Yeah, you just undo that zip, and hopefully your undersuit has a sort of zipper there. And yeah, men, unfortunately, not for women. I don't believe they make one. But yeah, for guys, yeah, you can sort of get a convenient zip. You obviously can't use it when you're underwater. It's only for surface use. If you think that you might need to sort of pee underwater, you're doing really long dives, then of course you'll want something like a pee valve, very unimaginatively named, unfortunately. They're a bit more complicated to put on than a convenient zip, and much more complicated to take off than a convenient zip. If you're a little bit squeamish or just don't want to hear about what's involved, I'm going to give you a few seconds to skip ahead to me talking about Argon. Okay, so you're still here. Right, so for women, your only choice for long dives used to be adult diapers. But now with the wonders of modern technology and silicone, you too can relieve yourself underwater with a P-valve. So you can get something like a she-P, a little bit different from a she-we. It's much like the male adhesive external catheter, and it basically glues to you before the dive and connects to a hose inside of your suit that leads to a small valve on your inner thigh. When nature does make that phone call, you unscrew the valve in your thigh, say a little prayer to whoever will listen, and just go for it. If you're lucky enough, it only leaks outside of your dry suit, and kind of the same goes for men, except ours is a bit more like an adhesive condom, which sounds as amazing as it sounds. There are balanced and unbalanced P-valves. Ideally choose a balanced system. This will help to stop cool ocean water from rushing the wrong way up that hose when you actually unscrew that little valve. But realistically, the fun actually comes when you're trying to find the right size external catheter, and be careful when putting them on because the glue is very effective at its job and you don't want any hair to get caught up in it. You sometimes need to cut these off at the end of the day in like a warm bath to try, because that adhesive is just, it grabs. It's the less glamorous side of extended diving. If you're really getting fancy with your dry suit diving, then a separate tank is a great choice. Something pretty small, because you don't need much. Something like a 1.5 litre or a 3 litre tank is more than enough, so that you're not using up valuable breathing gas just to fill up your suit and stay warm. But also, whilst air is a decent insulator, nitrox is just a more expensive, less effective alternate. And Trimix is a much more expensive, much less effective insulator as well, so you don't want to be putting Trimix into your suit. But there does exist a better gas to keep you warm, and that's Argon. But do not breathe it underwater under any circumstances, so never fit a second stage to an Argon tank. They're usually bright green, or a dull green at least, so it's usually fairly obvious, and they're usually marked up Argon. It'll make your voice sound kind of funny on the surface if you do breathe Argon, but it's pretty dangerous at depth, so never breathe it under pressure. You can find special first stages made for suit inflation, either with Argon or just plain old air, and they're really small, and they only have a single low pressure hose and an overpressure valve, maybe a button pressure gauge, but typically they're really small, and yeah. Normally you fit your small tank just kind of under your arm on the edge of your back plate. Some divers put it on their back and sort of attach it a bit like a pony. But yeah, normally it's sort of tucked out of the way, but it's only used for inflating your suit. Your dry suit is only really there to keep you dry. That's all it really does. It's what you wear underneath that is actually the most important for keeping you warm. So you can wear the most expensive, the fanciest gold-plated dry suit out there, but if you only wear your sweatpants underneath it, you're still going to get cold. Now, I'm going to talk about undersuits in much more detail in their own video next, because there is a lot of kind of technology and considerations to them. But some dry suits can actually have a built-in undersuit. Right now, I believe it's only really in waterproof dry suits. As far as I'm aware, they were the first to implement it, and what they have is basically a thin, like double mesh layer inside them that maintains a constant layer of insulation all over your body. The mesh doesn't compress, so you have even insulation, so that you don't get any cold spots where your straps usually squish it down. You don't have those in this, and they mean that gas can't get trapped in key spots. It's free to migrate around the entire suit, so you can always dump gas in an instant. They're not cheap though. but it's that kind of initial sort of outlay. Instead of buying two separate things, you're buying one big expensive thing. The internal lining is a little bit scratchy because it's this kind of nylon plasticky material, but I wouldn't wear it just in my boxer shorts. You would need a decent base layer to stay comfortable, because yeah, against bare skin it's not the most comfortable. One clever twist that I've seen is now an Apex Aqualung property, where you basically have a dry suit that's realistically one or two sizes too big for you, and a second stretchy suit over the top of it. So they call it fusion, and this combination means that your suit is pretty easy to get into. It's a little complicated, but once you get into it, it's pretty easy, and you have tons of flexibility because you have all that extra material, but you don't have a baggy flappy suit. You have that external one sort of keeping everything nice and neat. If you rub up against something, you may rip the external shell, but the actual internal membrane suit, the ones that's actually keeping you dry, might be unscathed. So all you have to do is just either patch that up or replace that external suit. So it's a clever concept, and I'm surprised more people aren't doing it. If you've chosen to go for a membrane suit, or you're even still deciding, then your suit's breathability may be a factor worth looking at. When you close that zipper, you are sealing yourself in a suit that effectively has a humidity of 100%, because it's a sealed environment with all of your sweat glands inside of it, or most of your sweat glands. When you're on the surface, it's nice to sort of be able to stay in your dry suit to keep rain and spray off you, and stay sort of nice and warm, but it can get a little bit funky inside, so a breathable material makes things much more comfortable. If you're teaching and you spend a lot of time on the surface with your students, then yeah, this means that you can spend a lot more time sort of out of the water, still in your dry suit, still feeling nice and comfortable, because it's a breathable material. It's not that it leaks, it won't let water in, but it'll just be much more comfortable on the inside of it. It's important that your dry suit fits you properly, obviously, and that you actually try it on before you actually shell out any money for it. This is best done in a walk-in freezer, because you will get hot trying on dry suits. The best way to do it is to put on your base layer and your undersuit and then your dry suit, to be honest, because realistically that's how you're going to be dressing to go for the dive. If that's pretty easy with all of your undersuit and everything, then great. Put a finger under your neck seal just to sort of let the air out. Don't damage it, obviously. Just kind of pull it away so it's not sort of airtight, and then kind of scrunch yourself into a small ball to let out as much air of the suit as possible. Now, if you can kneel down and touch the back of your neck, then you should be pretty good. Now, you don't want too much baggy material in any areas, or sort of particularly long arms or legs, just enough to get in and out of the suit and to move around pretty freely. When you're trying your suit on, be very careful not to pinch or pull any one particular part of the seals too much, because this can just lead to sort of ripping and tearing, and then even if you don't want the suit, you kind of have to pay for the repair. Use an unscented talcum powder, or better, a water-based lubricant to help slide yourself into the suit. There's two ways of doing it. You either apply it to yourself, or you apply it to the cuffs or whatnot itself. I tend to do it onto the actual cuffs, because then you don't end up with talcum powder inside your entire suit, but it's a personal preference thing. Talc is good to stop seals from sticking onto your skin and making it harder to get in, but if you use too much of it, especially on the inside of the suit, it can actually clog up your dump valve and sort of cause that to leak. For girls, you can actually get like snoods that kind of cover up your hair. This just makes life a lot easier trying to get into your suit without it like tugging on your hair so much. When you're storing your suit, I like to talc the seals so that they're covered, especially latex seals, because they can go really funny and just like literally fall apart if they touch themselves sort of whilst they're being stored for any length of time. And cleaning your zipper is very important. Just get a gentle brush, clean up any debris from between the teeth, and use a good sort of beeswax or zipper lubricant as suggested to keep the zipper from moving freely. Now, I like to keep my zipper closed when I actually store it. This stops stuff from getting in between the teeth and the zipper sort of bending or twisting the wrong way. Ideally, try and store your suit unfolded as much as possible, and I like to do it sort of upside down by the boots, kind of hang the boots up, and this lets any water or moisture inside trapped in the boots to actually drip out of the suit. If you do it the other way around, then everything just collects in your boots and you don't find it until the beginning of your next dive. If you have something like a hang air that blows fresh air inside, that's really nice because that gets some sort of airflow inside of the suit and just sort of freshens it up, because, you know. And if you do need to fold your suit, if you don't have any sort of hanging space, that's fine. But your primary focus is the zipper and keeping that as flat as possible. I'll do a completely separate video because it will take an entire video to show you how to sort of fold and roll up a dry suit. But yeah, keep that zipper as flat as possible and you're less likely to damage it. So that is dry suits. You'll find an entire range of dry suits, everything from really lightweight travel suits that you that won't sort of ruin your baggage allowance, but they're kind of thin and delicate, to ultra tough, kind of thick neoprene, heavy commercial diving suits, and of course everything in between. Right now I'm diving a membrane breathable dry suit, but if that ever fell into a giant paper shredder, I'd probably spend some time looking at the Apex KVR1 dry suit. It's basically one of their sort of fusion dry suits with that sort of big baggy suit with a second one over the top. I don't know whether I'd definitely go for one of those, but it would be sort of high on my shortlist. But my next dry suit will definitely be a membrane suit. I used to teach in a neoprene dry suit, and they're lovely. They're just tough as nails, but they're just so heavy to kind of lug around, and I have enough heavy stuff to carry without a dive master. So why would I bother with a big clunky suit if I can have this sort of neat light one? But what do you sort of decide? What do you use? What type of dry suit would you be considering? And of course, why? What's the most important feature for you? Is it the seals? Is it the material? Is it the pockets or the boots? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Next week, looking at the polls, it seems to be Drysuit Undersuits winning, which ties in quite nicely. So yeah, look forward to that, and I'll put another poll up for the other scuba diving equipment to get your opinion on what you want to see next. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.